He was trying to attack people and kill them, so he was a bit terrifying. I really bit off a bit more than I knew how to chew at that time. And that 1 year really was a turning point in my life where all of a sudden I understood things on a deeper level beyond anything any human had ever been able to teach me.
Today on Horse Chats, we're introducing Elsa Sinclair, who's another Equitana educator. Elsa has done some films that we're going to talk about, Taming the Wild. But before I introduce Elsa, I just want to remind you that the podcast brought to you by International Horse College, and the mission of International Horse College is to improve the welfare of horses around the world through the safe education of their riders, handlers and trainers. So have a look at the wide variety of horse courses incorporating horse welfare and safety around horses at internationalhorsecollege.com, registered training organisation 31352. So Taming the Wild is devoted to helping humans understand and interact well with horses in freedom. So this will be interesting. She's got 2 documentary films. She started the project of Better Understanding with Horses in Freedom, and that leads to Clinics podcast and a book to support others interested in learning more. And a little bit of information that I've got about Elsa. I've been looking through her YouTube channel and great, just lots of short clips that we can understand where she's coming on. And she's obviously got a sound, solid education and understanding of horses in the wild and just natural instincts, natural body language. So I'm really excited to bring her on. Now, welcome, Elsa. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this. And I'm doing really well. I just had the most brilliant day out in the sun with my horses, and it's the end of the day where I'm at. So it's time to sit down and have a chat with you all.
Elsa, I'd like to talk to you about the horses that you're working with now, where they are, what they're doing. But before we do that, our listeners like to get to know you a bit better, and you might have a quote that you use, and you might say it to inspire others. You might say it for yourself. You might find yourself teaching it all the time, talking to horses. Have you got one that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
I do. I have a favorite quote that I lean on, and it's by Mary Oliver, and it's, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?"
All right, I'm sure this inspires you as you go on and do your work, but just tell us a bit more how it's inspired you and even why this resonates with you so well. You know, how you came to even have this quote.
So I have to say that part of it is just a visceral feeling. When I read that or hear it, it sends a tingle up my spine. So part of it is a little bit inexplicable. But if I do think a little bit deeper about it, it's, why do we spend the time that we do doing anything that we do? And I've chosen to devote my life to this work with horses in freedom. And it is one wild and precious life that we have, and each moment sort of slips through your fingers and is gone. And it just feels so precious each moment we get. It would be a shame to waste it on something that didn't feel truly important to you. And I think everybody's a little different. I happen to be someone who really values what I do with the horses.
Now, wild horses, Mary. Why wild horses? There's lots of domesticated horses around you, I'm sure, but why have you found yourself particularly attracted to the wild horses?
So when we have a domesticated horse, we indoctrinate them from birth. They are taught to do things to please people because that's the way they get taken care of best. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if we really want the horse to be our teacher, if we want the horse to tell us how we could interact with them better, I find there's nothing quite as powerful as learning from an adult horse that has lived their own life where they didn't have to please a person. They interacted with other horses. They had to find their own food. They had to find their own water. They had to take care of their band and their babies and their friends. And then when you interact with that adult horse that has all of their own systems intact, they don't hold back. They tell you exactly how they feel about everything you do. And the 1 year that I spent in freedom with that Mustang in my first film, I learned more in that 1 year than I had in the 30 some years that I existed before that time. And that 1 year really was a turning point in my life where all of a sudden I understood things on a deeper level beyond anything any human had ever been able to teach me.
So the 1 year, and you said it was a great learning curve for you, but why bring on that 1 year? Why start it? Why, there must have been something there that was calling you to say, take this 1 year and do this.
Yeah, so it was actually one of those funny things where a student asked me, she said, "Do you think horses like being ridden?" And I was a trainer and I said, "Yeah, I think they love it." And she said, "Well, I mean, if it was an adult horse in the wild that had never met a person before, would it want to be ridden?" And I said, "Yeah, people bring in wild horses all the time. They train them to be ridden. I think they really enjoy it." And she said, "Yeah, but do you think that horse ever knew that it had a choice?" And then I was stumped. And I started doing tons of research and trying to find someone in the world who had spent time with an adult wild horse and built to the stage of riding without trapping them against a fence or using food rewards. And there just wasn't, other than Carolyn Resnick in her book, Naked Liberty. So Carolyn Resnick talks about it, but she had no pictures, she had no video, she had no sort of really basic evidence of her journey. And I thought somebody needs to do this in a way where we actually see how it works. But I didn't think it was going to be me. I just thought somebody should do it. So I started telling all of my horse trainer friends that somebody should do this. And they all laughed at me. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe nobody's going to do this. Maybe I'll do it when I retire, when I have more time on my hands. But then I couldn't stop talking about it. And everywhere I went and everybody I talked to, there was this project. Somebody needed to spend a year with a wild horse without ever trapping them between them and a fence, without ever putting a halter on them, without ever making food conditional, and without ever trying to take them away from their friends. Could you train that horse to be ridden? Would they enjoy it if they had a choice? I wanted to see it done just because nobody had ever done it in a way that was documented. Well, because I couldn't stop talking about it, eventually I ended up to be the one that did it. That wasn't really my plan, but it was just an idea that caught hold and I couldn't not do it at a certain point.
So for the 1 year, what preparation did you do to say, right, I'm going to do the 1 year? I'm not just going to wake up out of bed tomorrow and do it, but what preparation did you have to do to even start that 1 year?
So to begin with, I had to make sure that I built a space that was up to government standards. So before I went and got a wild horse, I had to have fences that were tall enough, and I had to pass the adoption requirements here in the US. And then in terms of what I thought I was going to do, I actually was really cocky. And I thought I was just going to take my normal training method and I was going to cut my bite-sized pieces down into smaller bite-sized pieces. And I thought that I was going to somehow make this work, or it wouldn't work. And in a year, I would give up on the project. That was my I just thought I was good enough that I could do it. So I ended up getting the wild horse, who I named Myrna. And there was some lessons along the way that I didn't expect, and it didn't work to just cut my training down into smaller bite-sized pieces. There were some big holes in my training that I think a domestic horse would never have pointed out. But a wild horse had some things to say to me about the things I didn't know yet. So I had to learn as I went. The year turned out spectacularly more successful than I ever anticipated. And as I said, I learned more in that 1 year than I had in all of my horse training previous before that.
Did you get just one horse?
No, I wanted to make sure that she had friends. I know that herd animals need a herd. So I got her with another mare that I got for a client that I was going to train with more traditional methods. And the two mares came to my house at the same time, so they got to share the trailer ride. And then I obviously had other horses as well. But that idea is that she always had all the friends she needed, all the food she needed unconditionally, all the space she needed. She was never trapped or contained. Obviously, I couldn't lose her into the forest. So I did have to have fences. But that was the premise.
How big an area did she have?
So by law, we have to have some shed space, so she has to have some roofs to get under. And then we included the area with the barns that she could go to. And then there was a runway out to a fairly large round pen that she could go to as well. So we basically had a strange shaped paddock because that's all the fencing I could afford at the time. But the rule was, in my mind, I always had to be closer to the fence than she was.
Okay. Yep. To give her that choice.
Yep. And then as soon as she was gentle enough, I took her out and I put her with my 20 horses on the 100 acres of pasture that I have. So one of the funny things when people see the film is they say, it doesn't look like there are other horses around. And that's because the woman that I had doing a lot of the filming, she was trying to make it very intimate and very personal. And so she was always putting herself between the other horses and us and trying to shoot into the forest or into the trees around us. And you don't really get a sense in the movie the fact that we always had other horses around. It's one of the things I would do differently if I could go back in time. But it still turned out a beautiful film in spite of that one small glitch in communication.
But I think the fact that she separated herself from the other horses is something that could be talked about.
Yeah, she was an amazing teacher, and she really did enjoy going to do things with me. And she was amazingly content to separate herself from the other horses to go do things with me. Even after she had a foal halfway through the year, she was really happy to leave her foal with the aunts and uncles and go do things with me, which really surprised me.
Wow. What was her name?
Her name was Myrna. Myrna means peace or beloved in a couple of different dialects and languages around the world. So it felt like what I was aiming for in that relationship.
Tell me about that first moment where she came in as a wild horse and all of a sudden you thought, she's looking at me, she's watching me, she's paying attention to me, she's interested in what I'm doing.
Yeah, that really took me by surprise, honestly. I was expecting a really long process of trying to build her trust. And I had all these plans of what I was going to do and when I was going to look at her and when I was going to look away and how this was going to build trust. And she basically came over and touched me within the first couple of hours. And I was able to take the number off from around her neck within the first day, which absolutely dumbfounded me. I thought, well, this is too easy. It's not supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be harder. But I think that was really the amazing thing about her, is that all the way through the process, she seemed to be out to prove to me, this is a lot easier than you think it is. Look, we'll do it together. And I think partially I just got lucky. I got a horse with an incredibly sensible, lovely disposition. She was from a herd area where she'd probably never seen people before, but I did get special permission to take her home within 3 days of being rounded up. So she wasn't in the holding corrals very long. She got in my trailer, she came home with me, and she settled in very, very quickly.
And just comparing her then to the other horse that you got, the other mare that you're breaking in or training with more traditional methods. Tell us a bit about, what you did with the other horse compared to what you did with her.
So the other horse learned how to wear a halter and move to the left and move to the right and do all of the yields and all of the standard training that you would do with a wild horse. The other horse had been in holding for a couple of years, so she had learned to be quite afraid of humans. And she was like handling dynamite. It was a little bit terrifying in a lot of ways. The two mares were very good friends, but Cleo, the one that I was training for my client, you just checked and double checked and triple checked that rope wasn't wound around your hand. Because if she got upset, you were losing a finger or two or your whole hand. And I had never experienced that kind of explosive behavior before. She did come around, she turned into an incredible horse. But it was very different having a horse that had really learned to be afraid of people before she got to me. Whereas the one that had just been wild and didn't know anything about people was relatively easy. She had never learned to fear people. She didn't know about people one way or the other. I was her first and only really experience with them.
And then, I saw some of the shorts where you were riding Mariner bareback. So tell me about what you did prior to the riding, how you introduced the fact that you could be on her back rather than beside her.
Yeah. So I believe that horses are constantly adjusting their position around each other. So they're on the left side, they're on the right side, they're in front, they're behind, they're farther away, they're closer. And there is an art to timing your changes of your position. So if you are on the left side too long, the horse is going to force you to be on the right side. They get tired of positions. And this happens really, really naturally. And it happens all the time if they're free to do what they choose. So if I could time my changes of position, the horses learned to trust me to do the right thing at the right time. And at a certain point, sitting on their back was no different from being on the left side or being on the right side. The question is, how long was it okay for? And we start with this premise that you can only want things you don't have enough of. And so if I could always leave her wanting more of my company in each place, we could build up to me being there longer and longer and longer. Now, I made a lot of mistakes. And so I don't think that this premise went as smoothly as I'm making it sound. I messed up a lot and I had to go home and think about it. And I got to sit in the hay manger and cry my eyes out and think that I was never, ever going to succeed before the puzzle pieces would fall into place. And I would go, oh, of course, that's why it didn't work. This is what I have to change. So being on her back to start with, I made sure that she was comfortable with me getting up high, whether I was climbing on a fence or climbing up on a mounting block. And the idea is that that was interesting and it tickled her curiosity and it tickled her senses. And she was curious and wanted more. And then I would leave, not leave completely, just to a different place, be on the other side, be farther away, be touching her in a different place. So she could ruminate on it and think what would happen if Elsa stayed there longer. And then I just stretched that a little bit at a time until I could go from the mounting block over the top of her back and land on the other side. And it wasn't scary because it wasn't for too long. And then we just did that enough times that I could eventually stay on her back for a few moments and then go off the other side until she thought it was really fun. And then the turning point was when she figured out she could carry me places because Myrna really liked to go places. She liked to do things. And humans are slow. So when she could carry me, it meant that I didn't get left behind. And she thought that was absolutely fabulous. So it really was the key of the timing, learning the timing so I left her wanting more instead of leaving her wanting less.
I'm just digesting that. I think, wow,
Yeah.
it's certainly taken a lot of time with her, the research, the just sort of coming in from that point of view and keeping her curious as well.
Yeah. And that's really the thing. I did this project as a novelty. I thought people would watch the movie, they go, isn't that sweet? And then we would all go back to our normal horse training. I had no idea this would turn into a career because I thought, who in the world is going to want to train a horse this slowly? This is ridiculous. It's so slow. It really took me by surprise that after the film was finished, people actually wanted to learn what I'd done. And I'd say, well, I can teach you a little bit, but it's really slow and you're not going to like it. And yet it's made massive changes in people's lives. And I have more and more interest and it's just snowballed. And that's fascinating to me that there is this really, really, really slow way of training that is far more interesting to the world than I ever anticipated.
Tell me then, because there's always challenges going into a different career. Did you get people saying, "Oh, that's a load of rubbish. It was all staged. It was all, it wasn't done in that timeline, or the horse had already been broken in or been handled, something, had training before, took longer than a year." Did you get people saying that?
I have never had anybody say that to my face, and I've never even heard a rumor of somebody saying it. Now, I can't be everywhere in the world. I'm sure somebody said that, but it's never come back to me. And honestly, everybody's allowed to believe what they want to believe. And the experience was valuable to me, whether anybody else believes it or not. And it turns out it seems to be valuable to quite a few people around the world. I'm sure there will be some who just believe it's impossible, and that is their right to believe that too.
I think sometimes you do things a bit out of the box, and people do jump all over it and say, oh, that's no good, that's a bit of a fairy tale. So I think wonderful. Now, from there, though, what was the next step when you thought, oh, maybe I should be doing this a bit more? You put your film out there. Did people contact you? Did you get other horses to train that way? Just tell us a little bit more how your career's progressed since that film.
So it's really not practical for me to train anybody else's horse. There's just not enough hours in the day for me to do that. I am full to the brim training my own horses. I did go on and do a second movie where I had another horse. It wasn't in Full Freedom, but took a lot of the concepts that I'd learned in Full Freedom and put it into the second movie. I'm working on the third movie right now. So most of my work is with my own horses to continue to evolve the ideas because it's fascinating to me. In terms of other people, people will see the movie and then they'll contact me and they'll say, well, we want to learn more. And, I've got a couple of different avenues that I can teach. But in general, I find that I have a very core basic process that even if people just do 5 or 10 minutes before they put their halter on, they find that everything else goes better. And this was a huge surprise to me. I did not anticipate. I actually was a little worried that people would do my process and then the horses would be like, I just want to be free forever. Don't put my halter on. I was a little afraid it was going to backfire, but it really has not. What I've found is that when horses feel like you understand them a little bit better, they are even happier to have that halter go on. And they are even happier to work in a huge range of different ways with humans. But taking that time to get to know them for who they are in a state of freedom really does seem to improve everything that comes after it. So that's essentially what I do. Is there's not going to be many people who work in full freedom, but there are a huge amount of people that would like to have better relationships with their horses. And they can take the systems that I built with wild horses in full freedom and put them into their own lives in the ways that make sense for them.
Yeah. And you've got a book. I haven't seen the book yet. Tell us a bit about the book.
The book is, it will be out in early 2025. So you haven't seen it yet because the publisher had a couple of hiccups and Trafalgar Square was not quite ready to release it yet. It was actually supposed to be out in November, but it's been delayed. So hopefully early 2025. What the book does is it takes all of the theory that I used to train, but it tells it in story format. So how did I learn that theory? What series of events came through my life to teach me that this was important, that I needed to do things a certain way? So what I did is I took the year that I spent with Myrna. And of course, there's a film about it, but the film is more inspirational than anything else. I only filmed once a month for a year. So there's a lot of things that weren't filmed. The book is going to fill in a lot of those gaps. It's going to tell people what happened when the cameras weren't running. But it's also going to really sort of outline how it is that I learned the things that I needed to learn so that I now have a system of teaching other people.
Okay. Another thing I would like to ask you about is what horses do you have now? Have you brought in other horses since this particular one? You said you.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
My third movie was going to follow the same premise as the first movie, but this time I was going to do it with 2 horses instead of 1. And the idea was they were going to both be stallions because I did a mare in the first movie. So we're going to go with the stallions for the third movie. And one of them was going to be from the wild. So same idea, a full adult horse that knew what they liked, knew their own wants and needs and desires, and they could really teach me. But a horse that didn't know people. The second one was going to be a horse that had had bad experiences with people and really didn't trust people. So the second one ended up being a horse that was being sent to slaughter. And I caught him just before he crossed the border to Canada and brought him home. and he was trying to attack people and kill them. So he was a bit terrifying. I really bit off a bit more than I knew how to chew at that time. And it's been a huge, huge learning curve again. The stallion that came from the wild was pretty straightforward. So he's doing beautifully. The stallion that had come with a lot of past trauma, I really had to learn a few new things to apply all of these same concepts in freedom to a horse that had really bad experiences with people.
You said something about crossing the border to Canada. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so there's no slaughterhouses in the US that will slaughter horses. So to slaughter horses, they have to go to Canada or Mexico. And so we have dealers that will be close to the border that will gather horses that nobody wants and then take them across the border. So I found my stallion Atlas in one of those situations. It's actually really difficult to find a dangerous stallion in the United States. I would call around and people would say, "Oh, I had the perfect horse for you, but we put him to sleep a month ago." Or, "Oh, I had the perfect horse for you, but we gelded him and he's doing just fine now."
And even though you're putting together a film, I've noticed some shorts on your, shorter videos on your YouTube channel with
Yeah.
both horses. And then you're doing filming as well for that.
Yes. So throughout the filming process, I have a Patreon group where people give me a little bit of money each month towards this project, and I share updates each week or so. I give a little update about how we're doing and what we're doing. It was supposed to be a year, but honestly, my schedule is a little bit crazy now. With the first film, I was just home, so I could devote all that time. Now I travel more than half the year teaching clinics, and I have a lot more on my plate. So that 1 year project has turned into a longer one. We're going on 5 years now. But that's the beauty of it. It's not about trying to force the horse into an end result. It's about, what can the horse teach me on the way to this goal? If I never ride them, it's okay. But what have I learned on the journey with them towards that potential goal? And I joke with my students is that you can really train any horse in freedom if both of you live long enough.
Yes. Yes, I can see that.
It's not quick. It's very, very slow. And I really try and be honest with people about it. We have halters and round pens and food rewards and all of these training techniques because we need to get things done faster. And that's absolutely valid. But there is a beauty to slowing down and asking the horse, if you could dictate how we were training, what would it look like?
With all your travel, I know that you're coming over to Equitana.
I am.
What are you doing at Equitana? What are you presenting?
So I've got a couple of demos that I will be doing, as well as some classroom time. And a lot of this will be dictated by the horses I get to demo with. So I can't give you an exact rundown of what I'll be teaching because it really is a collaboration with the horses that I get, and I haven't met them yet. But what I will be teaching is the art of reading horses and understanding what it is that you're looking at, so that then you could take that into, how do I make something between a horse and a human because of what I know about the horse. So learning to read them is something that I think all of us are perpetually learning how to do better. And I'm just going to give my perspective on that in case it's helpful for people.
I'm sure it will be helpful for sure. Do you know when or where, what arena, what days?
I would have to look that up. I'm sorry, I don't have that information with me right now, but I'm sure it will be listed in the program.
Well, I was going to say to people, it's great that you've got the time and days, but check the program just in case things change.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is too, just with your ongoing, you've got a group of people who sponsor you. Tell us a bit, I know you've got a podcast, so tell us a bit about, if people are interested in getting more regular updates and happy to pay a small fee for that, how can they contact you through that and be part of that?
So the best way is to go to my website, tamingwild.com.
Yep.
And that will have all of the links to everything from the movies to the Patreon group where I post updates of what I'm doing, to the podcast. There's all sorts of things that you can get there. I am just thrilled that there are people around the world that are fascinated about this the way I am. Honestly, I'd be doing it just for myself, even if nobody else was interested, because I love it more than anything. But it is wonderful that I seem to have this whole community of people who are also interested in learning to read the horses better, learning their point of view, learning how they would want training to be if they get a say.
And if you miss those contact details, just go to horsechats.com, and on that horsechats.com website, there's a search. It's a pretty good search. So I think if you search for Elsa, search for Sinclair, I'm sure if you search for Taming Wild, you'll get something. And down the bottom of Elsa's page, so we do a page for each episode of the podcast, down the bottom you'll find all those links that we'll get from Elsa, and then that way you'll be able to go through. But before we go, Elsa, is there anything else that I could have asked you but didn't ask you?
I think that the one thing that I really would like people to know is that timing is the biggest thing that I've learned from the wild horses. When you do things is far more important than exactly what you do. And I think the best horse trainers in the world know this. But it's a lot easier for most horse trainers to teach you what to do. How do you hold your lead rope? How do you put pressure on? How do you take pressure off? Teaching what to do is really easy. It's like a cookbook. But teaching when to do it, that is an art form. And that is an art form which is a little bit different for every horse you meet. So learning how to adapt your timing to the horse in front of you, this is what the best horsemen around the world do on instinct. And I think all of us could study this a little bit more. And it entertains me every day. So anybody else who's fascinated by it, I look forward to meeting you.
All right, so there you have it. And I think if you want to start with the timing, or you think your timing's all right, you just want to learn a bit more, because wild horses are a lot more sensitive to domestic horses. And I think that, if you can refine your timing just a little bit more and a little bit more all the time, you're going to become a better horse person. So I look forward to seeing you at Equitana, Elsa, and I think we'll be catching up again soon. I'm sure we'll have another update. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.